Today we are going to thoroughly study Confucius's profound Analects together. The Analects of Confucius represent the foundational Confucian thought and are distinctly not part of Buddhism. They are generally included in traditional Chinese studies, which encompass a wide range of classical texts and philosophical ideas. People often talk about the prominent and influential traditions of Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. These three distinct religions, or more accurately, three profound schools of thought, are frequently discussed. Among these significant traditions, what we are specifically discussing now is the profound Confucian teachings, as expounded by Confucius himself. This profound philosophy of Confucius truly should be something everyone can become familiar with and understand. But nowadays it seems many people may not pay much attention to its enduring wisdom. Actually, there is a great deal of profound meaning contained within it, although it doesn't talk about karma and cause and effect here, or the merits of liberation, the benefits of bodhicitta, and so on. None of these are discussed. But generally speaking, when it comes to precisely how we conduct ourselves and handle various matters in real life, many of these principles are profoundly meaningful and hold significant wisdom. In this context, there was a highly respected master of Chinese studies named Khenpo, who was not only a distinguished thinker but also an eminent scholar of Chinese classics, widely recognized as a person of immense wisdom and intellectual depth. At that time, he said, he advised everyone that there are two major responsibilities one should have. All Chinese people have two major responsibilities. One significant responsibility is that everyone should diligently study the profound Analects of Confucius. The other responsibility is to encourage others to study it as well, to study it oneself and to encourage others to diligently study it. So I truly think that all of us gathered here today, as well as future listeners, should all try to experience for ourselves the kind of thinking that was from over 2,500 years ago. Many of us truly believe that the profound thinking of the ancients is now completely outdated and no longer relevant, or that it is decadent or lacking in creativity. This is what some people think, but in fact this is a completely mistaken idea. We should recognize that the wisdom of the ancients, in some significant respects, it far surpasses the profound depth of our modern worldly thinking. So after we carefully study it, it should be truly meaningful for everyone. Therefore, we still strongly encourage everyone to perhaps deeply study and thoroughly understand some of the rich traditional, cultural, and classical Chinese philosophical thought, including the comprehensive teachings of the various influential schools of thought, such as the three-character classic, the 1,000-character classic, and the doctrine of the mean. There are also standards for being a good student and child and the great learning. All of these are works I have read and found very meaningful. Earlier, we also talked about the classic of filial piety. And there are also Mencius, Zhuangzi, and Han Feizi. In fact, many prominent figures like Mencius, Zhuangzi, and Han Feizi are actually the names of their respective authors. Later, when his profound and extensive teachings were meticulously compiled, they were then attributed to him as the original and true author. There are indeed many cases like this, just as in some of the Buddha's own teachings, for example, the significant Manjushri's Questions Sutra, the Sutra of Samantabhadra's questions, the Sutra of the Dragon King's questions, and so on. The naming of these is basically the same. So just a couple of days ago, we all collectively attended a very insightful lesson which primarily discussed Confucius's specific and detailed analysis of people and various matters. He didn't have a particularly rigid or strict format to make sweeping, uniform, and often overly simplistic judgments about complex situations. It's truly not like that at all. Many people nowadays, including those who rely on the knowledge we learn in school, basically follow a rather rigid, inflexible, and somewhat unyielding approach. There's a lack of flexibility. So in our Tibetan Buddhism, within the debates of Buddhist logic, pramana, there are indeed many different forms of refutation where one effectively refutes the viewpoints of others. Many doctrines that are rigid and dogmatic he is able to dissect and lay open. This is profoundly meaningful because we human beings move through a world filled with knowledge of many kinds, and such analysis helps us sort, compare, and understand how each kind ought to be used. Applied with care, this knowledge becomes truly meaningful and deeply useful in real practice today. The profound lesson we discussed earlier may also have truly made you feel the immense significance of Confucius's timeless philosophy. Sometimes it is also very deeply meaningful and profoundly impactful. So today, what we are talking about is this. Confucius said, "I speak with Hui all day, and he never opposes me as if he were slow-witted. But when he withdraws and reflects in private, he is able to understand and express himself. Hui is not slow-witted." Here, this is a conversation between Confucius and Yan Hui. Yan Hui, as mentioned earlier, was probably Confucius' most capable disciple. He was also someone who received a prophecy from the Buddha. Some of his words and actions should be very meaningful and significant. So, in the Analects, it seems this is indeed the very first time he appears. In fact, according to the ancient Chinese philosopher Confucius, some historical records say that Yan Hui was indeed 30 years younger than him, a significant age difference, while others say 40 years younger. But in a few other books, it truly seems that 40 years younger is more reasonable. Among all of Confucius's students, he was the one with the greatest potential for receiving and transmitting the master's teachings, what we in Buddhism call the disciple, most endowed with the power of transmission and blessing. He was also from Shandong. Of Confucius's 3,000 disciples and 72 sages, in fact, all 72 were truly from Shandong, remarkably. So people generally refer to Shandong as the home of Confucius and Mencius, the land of propriety and etiquette. There are indeed many such titles. Later, around the 1970s and into the subsequent period, many ancient Confucius temples were tragically destroyed. So actually, when I talk about Confucius's profound teachings today, I distinctly remember when I was quite young, actually, probably just in my teens, in the 1970s, I also attended meetings criticizing Lin Biao and Confucius. Everyone was shouting slogans like, "Down with Confucius II" and "Down with Lin Biao." We were quite young at the time, shouting loudly, but we didn't even know who Confucius II was. It was only in some drawings. On some white pieces of paper there was a drawing of a person with a rather curved nose, and that was supposed to be Confucius II. Later, when I was in elementary school, I actually started my elementary school education at the age of 15. When I was attending elementary school, there was, you see, also a female relative of mine. She was a student, and at the time she was a bit taller than the others. So everyone called her Confucius II. Among our classmates, there was someone called Confucius II. Why was that? Because her nose was quite curved and rather big. Back then, at every single meeting, Confucius was very often indeed criticized, and Lin Biao was frequently criticized as well. Lin Biao and Confucius were both considered targets that needed to be criticized at the time. And in our elementary school, actually, everyone had some kind of political label, including the then popular slogan to completely overthrow the Gang of Four, Wang Hongwen, Zhang Chengqiao, Zhang Qing, and the others. And in our school, there were representatives for each of them. The Wang Hongwen was a bit younger. He was called Wang Hongwen, and that one was called Zhang Chengqiao. So the students were quite mischievous. As for those people in the class, the ones who weren't doing so well, who were a bit more vulnerable, they were all seen as negative examples and were often criticized. Those who were a bit better, who had some ability, were given slightly higher and more prestigious titles at that particular time. So the kind of traditional Confucian thinking and philosophical principles we had back then suffered a very serious and profound blow. Why am I talking about this? Actually, at that time in Shandong, it should have been like the historically significant Shanxi region, a place where the profound influence of Buddhism was exceptionally prosperous during the glorious Tang dynasty. Even now, if you go there, you can still find numerous relics of Buddhist culture. Some significant aspects of their thinking have also been carefully preserved. And then, after I went to Shandong, even now, although many of the Confucian temples from back then have already been destroyed later on as well, people continued to value traditional culture in their lives. And those habits also took root and indeed sprouted there. So we may indeed have various feelings about the changes occurring in any given era, and are profoundly affected by them as well. So here, I'm not entirely sure who I was talking about just now. Maybe I was talking about Yan Hui. This section mainly concerns the conversation between Confucius and Yan Hui. What kind of conversation was it? Confucius said, I speak to Hui. I spoke to Hui, perhaps teaching or explaining various things to him which involved a good amount of detailed instruction, because Confucius was the teacher and Yan Hui was the student, his disciple. He would teach him things related to etiquette and rituals. At this time, all day long, he never went against me as if he were slow-witted. Now, compared to some of his other disciples, Yan Hui's personality was different. Some of the other disciples seemed not to have much knowledge inside, but just on the surface. They liked to show off their extensive knowledge to others, or were incredibly eloquent and exceptionally good at debating, truly very good at talking. But it seemed that Yan Hui always never went against him. Never going against him truly meant he didn't argue, didn't attack, or didn't resist him in any way. Every single word here carries some significant meaning, because Yan Hui was truly wise. When his teacher was teaching him, he didn't deliberately refute him or pick faults on purpose. He simply didn't have that kind of personality. Even during his lectures, Yan Hui, among all the disciples, would always listen with profound attentiveness, paying very close and meticulous attention to every single detail. He wouldn't ever get easily distracted or begin to act out in any way, or being arrogant himself. He would never do that. So on the surface it seemed as if he was foolish. It was almost as if he were the most dim-witted disciple. This was just precisely how things appeared at that particular time. But when he went back and reflected upon it in private, it was truly enough to show that Yan Hui was not foolish at all. Then in private, after he went home, he would ponder further upon these matters. Confucius said, I would carefully observe all of his actions, his profound wisdom, and his overall behavior and conduct. In class it seemed like I couldn't see it, as if he was just a dull student. But after class, when he went home, Yan Hui would always, without fail, diligently take whatever Confucius taught on the first day and think about it carefully, reflect on it seriously. Afterward, he would meticulously start to analyze and thoroughly dissect the situation or subject matter. Then he would profoundly begin to reflect deeply on himself and his actions. And that alone was enough to demonstrate that he didn't just listen to the teacher's words and memorize them by rote. It wasn't like that. He also had the ability to develop his own ideas. He was fully capable of expanding on them. Not only did he understand the principles Confucius taught at the time, but on that basis, he would develop his own unique thoughts and truly show remarkable creativity. So it said Hui was not foolish at all. In fact, Yan Hui seemed to be wise while appearing simple-minded. In terms of his attitude toward learning, he wasn't particularly eloquent or persuasive, not the type who was especially good with words. That wasn't the case. But in reality, this person was still very intelligent. When we observe people among us, wow, it seems that those who don't talk much and are rather quiet are not simple people. You shouldn't underestimate them. Such a person is actually quite remarkable. What Confucius meant was, among people there are several types, and one type of person, their knowledge is rather superficial, always staying at the surface level of words, never delving into the deeper understanding or practical application of the subject matter, always floating on the surface. Then there are people who, on the surface, it seems like this individual is rather deep and quite reserved, but in actual reality, they are fully and completely aware of absolutely everything that's going on, a wise and insightful individual. So here, the first aspect is most people can't tell just by looking at the surface, just like Yan Hui. He seemed to be someone who had no problems in class and never argued with others. And on the surface, he was rather, how should I put it, just like the saying, great wisdom appears as foolishness. He wasn't someone who particularly liked to show off, nor was he especially lively or overtly attention-seeking. He wasn't like that at all. But in reality, he was actually very impressive and quite remarkable. It's like the old saying, as still as a wooden rooster, right? They may look a bit dull, but that's not actually the true case at all. Sometimes when they're actively fighting, they can be quite dynamic and engaging. Some of the roosters look just like wooden roosters, very stiff and lifeless. But actually, if you looked into their eyes, you'd see that all the chickens around them were completely subdued by them. Some people could even tell just from their eyes. You could see it clearly. Didn't Mencius also say this before? He said you could tell if someone is wise just by looking at their eyes. Mencius was very observant of people. When he observed that someone's eyes were particularly bright, at that moment, within that extraordinary brightness, one distinct kind of look was undeniably clever and subtly cunning, while another kind was profoundly deep and impressively full of significant substance. There was that kind of look in their eyes. So for wise people, as we say, it's clear at a glance. You can tell right away that this particular individual is quite remarkably impressive. Sometimes we too, when we encounter some prominent leaders in our daily life, our first feeling, our first impression is, oh, this person might be quite formidable. Looking closely at their eyes, the way they speak, their overall attitude, I'm accustomed to, whenever a new leader arrives, the first thing I do is look at their eyes. Some people, at first glance, can often seem rather simple and quite unassuming. Maybe they can talk, can argue, but perhaps it's true that you can't guess with 100% certainty. But still, in some cases, by carefully observing a person's eyes, facial expressions, and their speech patterns, and looking closely from all relevant aspects, you can still infer a thing or two. So observing people is actually very important. On the one hand, it's about how they appear on the surface and through that surface. At that time, Confucius also appeared as if, when so many attentive students were listening to him, there was basically no discernible difference among them at all. But if you look carefully, whether it's the particular way this individual expresses himself, you should be able to clearly see it from various important aspects. The second significant aspect is that Yan Hui was actually very respectful toward Confucius. In this regard, on one hand, he possessed a deep wisdom which was not apparent on the surface. Secondly, there's also the esteemed Yan Hui, who was extremely respectful toward his teacher. He wasn't the type who, before Confucius had even finished speaking, would immediately raise his hand saying, "No, you're wrong." He never pointed fingers or criticized. When it came to his teacher's words, he always maintained a sense of respect and reverence. It was on the foundation of this respect that he engaged in reflection. So, compared to some of the various aspects of teaching and learning, later on, including his prominent disciple Zilu and other individuals, his approach and demeanor were notably different. Consequently, he naturally developed a profound sense of awe and deep reverence toward the esteemed figure of Confucius. This is unlike some students in the West today. Some students, their personal value system is such that the more they actively argue with the teacher in class, the better it is generally considered to be. Actually, a major difference between Eastern and Western cultures is not just in Buddhism, as everyone knows. The case in Buddhism is like whether toward our esteemed teachers or even now within our institute, we often refer to teachers with respectful titles. Actually, when it comes to certain worldly subjects, including theoretical linguistics and formal logic, for this kind of worldly knowledge, if you are a teacher on these subjects, it's perfectly fine to call someone teacher, but when it truly comes to the profound Dharma, the simple title of teacher may indeed lack sufficient depth. It should be something more akin to a spiritual friend, for example, or perhaps an acharya, or even a revered guru. The Buddha explained this very fully and clearly in the sutras. So, if you just use the title teacher, in your heart you may only regard them as an ordinary teacher of academic subjects. That kind of respect is just the usual respect for a school teacher. If that's the case, the knowledge they impart to you will also only be on the surface level of academic learning. Beyond that, any deeper so-called blessings or spiritual power, you definitely won't be able to receive those. It should be, as Master Yin Guang said, with one part respect, you gain one part benefit. If you truly have respect for knowledge, you will be able to obtain the essence of that knowledge. If you have the respect for a guru that a disciple should have, then you will also receive such benefits. So as for Yan Hui, at that time he mainly focused on his own traditional culture and had a deep sense of respect for Confucius. The kind of respect that in Buddhism we call true reverence for a spiritual teacher, that level of respect. Because of this, among the many thousands of Confucius students, Almost all aspects of Yan Hui's life and character were such that he became a truly authoritative and highly capable individual. This is the second aspect. The third point is this: why did Yan Hui, on the spot, give no retort and engage in no debate? In reality, he turned the question back on himself and pondered. He was cultivating what, in Buddhism, we call the wisdom born of reflection and introspection. In this respect, he is exceptionally capable. Without this, most of us would only approach it at the surface level, holding a merely superficial grasp rather than any real understanding. Just a surface-level grasp of the lessons probably wouldn't be enough to truly and fully answer many important and complex questions in some situations. So, how should I put it? It's his wisdom of contemplation. After listening, he would analyze everything one by one himself. As mentioned earlier, he would often withdraw and deeply reflect on himself. So perhaps at that time he felt he didn't have a fully mature line of thinking to refute right then and there. It truly wasn't reasonable. After going back, he would deeply reflect upon it. He absolutely had to see through it and fully digest it by himself. It would definitely be like this. Therefore, he did not cling to any fixed, supposedly mature line of thinking, and he did not press forward into extended argument or rebuttal. That is one dimension. Another is this: Yan Hui embodied the unity of knowing and doing, aligning his understanding with concrete practice. What he knew, could he really put it into practice? Between his understanding and his actions, some of us would say knowing is one thing, but actually doing it is much harder. So when it comes to the unity of knowledge and action, he was probably quite a remarkable individual, so at that time he also had some room to put his philosophical ideas into practical application. There was indeed someone noteworthy named Wang Yangming. In Confucian culture, Wang Yangming, he was a representative figure. His teachings are still highly regarded by many later scholars of Chinese classics. What did he mainly advocate? The unity of knowledge and action. The profound knowledge and deep understanding he acquired were meticulously put into practical application and tangible actions in his actual daily life and endeavors. The wisdom from contemplation in the latter part of the verse it says, the Dharma king, the wish-fulfilling jewel, said, hearing is not enough to eliminate exaggeration or distortion. It is impossible to develop an unwavering, definitive understanding. To the Buddha, the Dharma, therefore, it is through extensive teaching, debate, and composition that one gives rise to contemplative wisdom. Just like what is described here, in the case of Yan Hui, he would repeatedly reflect and contemplate, and only after that could he explain these principles more clearly. From what I can indeed see of Khenpo Ajun's words, in fact, there is also something very quite similar. It seems that he didn't actually say much, but in reality, after each significant event, whether it was practicing the rigorous preliminaries or diligently spreading the Dharma, for many things indeed, he would carry them out earnestly and honestly with utmost dedication. Therefore, as it is clearly and precisely stated in a Buddhist scripture, the so-called truly wise person does not necessarily need to be eloquent or highly skilled in a formal debate, but is wise in fearlessly and courageously upholding virtue. This should be from the Dhammapada Sutra with parables. A wise person isn't merely skilled in debate, eloquent speech, or good at arguing. It's not like that. So what is a true wise person? It is someone who protects and upholds virtuous dharma very well. That is the true wise person. In which aspects he would use his own wisdom to observe and understand. After understanding, he would truly put it into practice in his actions. So, as for Yan Hui, he had several notable characteristics. One is that on the surface he did not overtly show off his knowledge. He was also very respectful toward his esteemed teacher. He consistently showed him great respect. In many of the later conversations that took place between Yan Hui and Confucius, it's also evident that Yan Hui had great respect for Confucius. This too is a kind of what we call a karmic connection, or a kind of destiny. This is very important, and it's also clear that Confucius could see this because he possessed wisdom and understanding. Basically, you can clearly see it reflected in all the intricate little details about him and his actions. It truly seems that Yan Hui really didn't say very much at all. When we give presentation here, in this specific context, there are also some people who are not very willing to. This also exists among the women. But perhaps they are indeed followers of Yan Hui and truly don't want to reveal themselves, right? They still keep their profound wisdom hidden deep within their own hearts. The other day, they explicitly said they didn't dare to give presentation. But I still hope everyone will give presentation. When it comes to presentation, even if you don't do well, it's still a kind of practice for yourself. At the beginning, no one can do it well. Especially for us here, perhaps when we were quite young, when we were very little children, we never really attended a proper formal school, you know. We were self-taught. So whether it's language or communication skills, there are definitely some shortcomings in various aspects. But you have to truly bravely push yourself onward and forward. Gradually, you will make progress. If you always truly feel like you don't dare to do anything at all, then you might not make any significant progress whatsoever. So, in the past, in Japan, there was a profound and influential philosophy called Shuhari. Shu specifically means to diligently uphold your own fundamental principles and established philosophy. Ha then means breaking away from some of your old, truly unhelpful ideas and ingrained thoughts, and then developing creativity. The concept of Ri signifies that ultimately you can become truly independent and firmly stand on your own. This means you can establish your very own distinct and unique perspective. That is precisely how it can be effectively realized. So everyone goes through a process like this. However, some individuals are truly afraid to break through during this entire process. They are genuinely afraid of being criticized by others, and they are also afraid that others will say they do not speak well. Perhaps on the surface they do not overtly show it. It is entirely possible they are just keeping a very low profile and patiently biding their time. Some practitioners are unwilling to communicate with others. That's how it is. But with this knowledge we have, everyone is trying their best to speak up and make their voices heard. During the evening tutoring sessions, I've noticed that in some groups, the voices are still quite low, as always, and the people sitting nearby can't really hear them clearly either. It's as if they're not even reciting the Avalokiteshvara mantra. It sounds more like they are just reading a book, and the things they say are not clear at all. In some groups, everyone is actually engaging in very in-depth discussions. Some people seem to just be watching the clock, just waiting for 30 minutes to pass, just waiting the whole time. Some, in this very short period of time, everyone is intensely focused on the handout. And when many people are actively discussing with each other, there's still a little bit of energy there. Actually, when it comes to learning, it might also actually require a certain, like Westerners, learning truly requires a certain kind of profound courage. Otherwise, back in the significant year of 1987, when His Holiness most profoundly taught the commentary on valid cognition, which is indeed the great commentary on Buddhist logic, specifically the great commentary on the Pramanavartika, Mipham Rinpoche's great and extensive commentary, at that time, His Holiness would give us a test every time. During the test, whatever we had learned that day, back then, the lectures were in the afternoon. Each time we would typically cover about 4 full pages of the Dege edition, meticulously studying the content. Basically, each of us it was as if we didn't need to look at the book for that day's material. Well, not that we didn't need to look at the book at all, but basically we understood the material because we were afraid. So day and night, over and over again, even on the way to class, we would be silently memorizing the material the whole way. One time there was a tulku, when that tulku is still around. Then he blurted out, "Yaluoza," and midway through the talk, His Holiness chuckled as if to say, "What do you mean, Yaluoza?" Much like when we ourselves are speaking, slip on a word, correct it, and everyone shares a laugh. Everyone still needs to exert some considerable effort and dedication. But if someone doesn't want to reveal themselves, perhaps on the very surface, Yan Hui always seemed rather dull-witted, indeed, you know. But later, Confucius said he still had the ability to express himself. Don't think that he's simple-minded. He's not that easy to truly figure out. Hui isn't foolish at all. If you think Hui is dull-witted, Don't assume that Yan Hui is just some simpleton. He's not ignorant either. He's actually very impressive. This person is remarkable. That's what it means. So, regarding this profound principle, everyone should really take the time to think it over very carefully. Next, the wise Confucius said, the master said, look at the means a man employs, observe the path he takes, examine what makes him content. How can a man conceal his character? How can he hide his true nature? It might seem like the ancients didn't really understand these things, but actually it's quite interesting. As for this sentence, it's actually Confucius' profound teaching on precisely how to observe people. When Confucius truly wanted to observe someone, he wouldn't just listen to one side of the story, nor would he judge based on just part of their behavior, nor would he simply think, oh, this person seems great. That's not the way to do it. When observing people, you may know the person, but not their heart. The human heart is indeed very complex. So when observing people, indeed nowadays, psychologists, for example, don't they have something called the iceberg theory? According to the well-known iceberg theory, in the vast ocean, there is a sharp iceberg that looks very much like a snowy mountain. What we actually see is just the visible tip of the iceberg. We only see a tiny bit. But in reality, its innermost and lower layers are not easily accessible, have all kinds of truly complex structures. There are so many things we truly haven't seen. Perhaps as much as 97% of it is what we have not yet observed. We often talk about the very tip of the iceberg, just like this. People are the same way. It might truly seem like, wow, this person is really quite impressive because they can articulate their thoughts well. Oh, this person might be great at debating. Very impressive. This person seems especially respectful, so they must be impressive. But what we see is just the tip of the iceberg. We only see a little bit, just a corner. If we were to attempt to judge the entire person based on that one aspect, that would be entirely unreasonable and quite unfair. Why is it unreasonable? He says you need to observe from several aspects here. One important aspect is to carefully look at their underlying motives. That means you really need to look at a person's actual actions. Of course, everyone certainly has their own unique way of interpreting this particular situation. You might have already heard something significant about this matter. Nowadays, there are a lot of experts in Chinese classics. For example, people like Fu Peirong and Yu Dan, and many other well-known experts in Chinese studies. They also talk about the Analects. Each person might have their own way of explaining it. I've listened to some of them before. Lately, I haven't had the time. When we look at a person, first, examine his present conduct right now and see what he actually does. Then look into the source of it. Ask what motive is at work and what intention truly drives him at heart. What are their actions like? And then what are their motivations? Examine what brings them peace. Ultimately, what is this person's goal? Or observe where his mind focuses. How could a person hide? How could he hide? Here, the word rendered as show means to conceal. Understood this way, the point is that character cannot be tucked away. How could these people possibly hide? How could these people possibly hide? Confucius repeats this important point twice. On the surface, it doesn't seem like much. Look closely at a person's underlying motives and then observe their subsequent actions. Consider their most fundamental and deeply held values. How could those individuals possibly hide? How could those people possibly hide? Actually, it seems pretty simple. But in reality, what we need to do is, for example, if we want to understand someone, if we want to understand a person, then look at what this person is doing right now. In Buddhism, don't we talk about observing virtuous friends, observing the teacher? When it comes to observing the teacher, look at what he is doing right now. Some of his current appearance and his overall behavior are worth observing and considering. What kind of person is he? Then carefully observe why he acts in this particular way. Is he merely putting on a superficial show, or is he genuinely like this? Then meticulously observe his underlying motivation. That is to say, in the past, this mainly concerns the past. Now, what is this person doing? In the past, what goals did this person have? What hopes and aspirations did he truly possess? Why did he choose to act in this particular manner? You can also observe from his past actions, including his underlying motivations. Then, if you examine what he relies upon, in the future, what will this person do? What kind of goals does he have? Whether it's the future, the past, or the present, or his actions and underlying motivations, what exactly is his ultimate overarching goal? At this crucial point, you can now clearly and unequivocally see it unfolding. It's impossible for this person to completely hide all his merits and faults. They will definitely be revealed. For example, when we observe a teacher, what are this teacher's behaviors like? What did he do in the past? What are his plans for the future? When you observe from these three aspects, oh, it turns out this person should be like this. Today I only see a few words from him. He just speaks very well, that's all. But in reality, if I truly know his entire motivation or some of his previous significant actions, then I can make a more informed judgment. Or maybe it's actually not like that. His future plans and some of his important, significant future goals are probably not like that either. When we carefully observe a person, it's not just about the surface. You can't just take a quick look and think that's enough. It's not like that. For example, some people want to become monks. He is now a monk. But what is the purpose of ordaining? The purpose of ordaining, is it truly because he has developed renunciation? What exactly will he be doing in the near future? Some of us might think, we don't even know what we'll do in the future. But as for what will be done in the very near future, those who are truly wise can also know it now. This kind of situation also exists. Sages can clearly see the subtle signs and truly know what is to come. As for wise sages, even the smallest thing they perceive with great insight. They can see the budding of the future from it. By seeing the beginning, they know the end. Isn't this what is said in the Han Feizi? If you can see the beginning, you can know the end. He sees just a tiny bit, but from that tiny little bit, he can deduce its fundamental root. It should be like this. So for us humans, consequently, sometimes in front of others, someone might treat you especially well. But is that person truly good to me? Does he have some ulterior motive, or is there something else? In the past, there was someone named Guanzhong. During the spring and autumn and warring states period, there was once a powerful and influential king, indeed named Duke Huan of Qi, right? Under this king, Guanzhong treated him with exceptional kindness and consideration. There were indeed 3 individuals under the king who treated him with remarkable benevolence. Guanzhong was undoubtedly the prime minister he trusted and relied upon the most. Later, when Guanzhong was nearing death and approaching his demise, when his health was failing, the king went to visit him. It looked as if he was already on the very verge of slowly dying. The king, deeply concerned, then asked, "What exactly should I do in the immediate future?" Because while he was alive, many of the king's affairs, both big and small, he was the one handling absolutely everything, making all the intricate plans. He was truly and remarkably impressive. At this particular point in time, Guanzhong then said to him, "There are 3 specific people you'd be much better off not keeping by your side. You should drive them all completely away." At this very point, the king then said, "These 3 people are the ones I trust the most." One of them, for my own personal sake, actually cooked his very own child's flesh into a nourishing soup for me to drink and consume. For the sake of my health, he didn't even care about his own son. He must be very good to me. Another man handed over his entire realm to me, an admirable act indeed. Yet another even castrated himself, and in the end he became a eunuch minister, serving in that role within my service and official household. So these 3, whether it's their own bodies, their sons' bodies, or their own land and property, in every respect they have shown me the utmost respect. They have always treated me extremely, extremely well. Then Guanzhong said, "Then that may be the case now, but what about the future? What will happen then?" "It doesn't necessarily mean they will always be good to you." Then the king asked, "Why is it that you never said anything while you were here, but now that you're leaving, you tell me this?" Then Guanzhong replied, "When I was here, I could basically keep things under control. I was able to keep all of them in check. If things ever got out of hand, I could always report to you, Your Majesty. But once I'm gone, you may not be able to control them." And then Guanzhong passed away. After Guanzhong died, at first the king believed Guanzhong's words and drove all 3 of them completely away. But later, after much careful and extensive deliberation, he thoughtfully called the 3 of them back once again. After the 3 of them returned, sure enough, they had ulterior motives. Then they usurped the throne. In the end, they either forced the king to abdicate or killed him. So when it comes to the people around us, if someone is especially good to you, is it genuine kindness or just a facade? It's really hard to say. So what I'm saying here is, when we observe a person, first and foremost, we need to thoroughly understand their actions in a broad and comprehensive sense. That's indeed one crucial aspect to meticulously observe. Then observe the reasons behind their actions. It is important to thoroughly analyze things from a comprehensive and overall perspective. You must strive to deeply understand this person's underlying motives and all of their observable behaviors and actions. The third aspect is to observe very carefully and in depth, whether it's this person's values, their beliefs, or their fundamental principles, or all other aspects. You need to understand them. So generally speaking, it truly takes a significant amount of time to get to know someone. As people often say, time reveals a person's heart, and distance tests a horse's strength. Only by understanding someone over a long period can you truly know them. Otherwise, the human heart is very complicated. People's behavior is also very complex. He who understands others is wise. He who understands himself is enlightened, right? Is that from the Tao Te Ching or something? He who understands others is wise. The point is this: to understand others is called being wise. To understand oneself is called being clear-sighted. In truth, amid our study of knowledge, it is self-knowledge that should guide and illuminate the learning we undertake, including from Mipham Rinpoche. Didn't he say in the Advice on the Rules of Kings, if we are going to assign someone a position, if we are going to give them a certain status, it should be carefully based on their individual abilities. Otherwise, it will be significantly detrimental to you. For example, if we genuinely want to choose someone to be in charge, you must understand them from all aspects. You need to know about this person's behavior, this person's knowledge, this person's morals, and this person's motivation. Only after thoroughly understanding all these intricate aspects can you properly assign them a suitable position. Otherwise, just like we previously mentioned, as the ancient sages wisely say, to truly know the subtle, which means to be able to carefully notice even the very tiniest of things and to accurately foresee what might potentially happen in the future. There was a great master who, when he met a great person in a certain place, didn't he say before that Buddhism is a kind of opium? Later, because of this statement, it became clear that, in the future, this person might potentially do something significant to Buddhism. There are such sayings, right? So every little action of a person, of course, sometimes the other party might make a wrong judgment. This kind of situation also exists. But generally speaking, the ability to observe people really matters. This is what we call the art of reading others, the practical craft of watching, discerning, and interpreting a person's words, expressions, and behavior with care and steady attention. Many people, especially some masters who observe with a pure mind, when someone around them, someone tells them, "I want to do this and that for you," or "I want to do something." Then this master or leader immediately puts them to use. But in the end, if they use the wrong person, it is also disadvantageous for themselves. Especially nowadays, there are some people who are always around, who in front of their leaders are extremely compliant on the surface. What is the purpose of this compliance? Because in all levels of today's society, everyone wants to climb higher and move up. At such times, leaders are very concerned about this, and personal relationships are very important. So, with a constant and unwavering effort, they diligently serve and meticulously flatter their leaders, but in stark reality, they harbor profoundly different and often self-serving motives. Therefore, as we look ahead to our future lives and endeavors, we will inevitably encounter all kinds of people, but among these individuals, some are truly sincere and wholehearted. Some people, however, have all kinds of ulterior motives and put on a grand show or act in front of you. In actual fact, their ultimate goal is simply to achieve their own personal ends. Just like what Guanzhong had mentioned earlier, and this is a very important point, some people would even offer their own son's flesh to someone, or even cut off parts of their own body, or give away all their land to someone else. But all three of these people had their own motives. When the king finally and truly trusted them, they began to gradually usurp power and seize complete control of the government. There are actually many such people in the world. Even among us monastics, we find ourselves, are there Buddhists who act like this? We are relatively pure. This is due to our education, which teaches us to eliminate selfishness and self-interest and to wholeheartedly work for the benefit of sentient beings. In this sense, this kind of education is very good. However, these teachings are just words and theories. Not everyone can truly let such things fully sink into the heart. So, in certain respects, we should be clear-sighted, and we ourselves must not remain muddled. Whatever we do, we should be good at observing everything around us. Of course, when we contemplate a pure mind, we should focus on that. But on the other hand, we also need to make use of people. Actually, this section from Confucius is mainly about the principles of management. When it comes to management, people are very important in all aspects of management. For example, if we are selecting someone and we choose the right person, then we can be very reassured about the matter in the future. If we choose the wrong person, not only will the task fail, but for the manager themselves, they will inevitably end up in a particularly difficult and troublesome situation, ultimately falling into a complex and inescapable pit of despair. And as time progresses, things will only get more and more challenging and difficult. So at this point, the main and crucial point we are considering is Confucius's insightful approach to the management of people. Perhaps it is the case that many individuals have never been involved in any form of management before, never participated in any kind of work, and have simply focused on study and contemplation. They may not necessarily understand the complexity of society. But if you truly engage with many things and interact with them for a period of time, you'll realize, oh, it's not what I imagined. Many students coming out of schools nowadays think that the world is very beautiful, very simple, and very pure. But in reality, that's not the case. This world is made of people, and among them, there are all kinds of individuals. So back then, as Confucius said, he generally had 9 methods or something like that. I'm not sure if that's mentioned later on, but Confucius was mentioned in the Zhuangzi. And when Confucius needed to employ people, he would first observe. What would he observe? He would send the person to a distant place and then have him handle some tasks. He would inquire about how this person performed. Then he would place this person close to himself and carefully observe how the person behaved once again. Subsequently, he would then assign some truly important tasks to him to see whether this person could handle significant responsibilities. Sometimes he would randomly ask him some truly tough and challenging questions in order to find out what was really and genuinely on his mind. In this regard, sometimes he would deliberately assign him tasks that were extremely urgent, things that needed to be done in a hurry. At other times, he would let him manage finances to see whether this person was trustworthy and how he behaved when faced with money and so on. There were many ways to observe a person. When Confucius selected people, he didn't just listen to what others said or praise someone, like, oh, good, good, good. Let him do it, let him come over. After some time had passed, his true nature would be revealed and everything would come to light. It wasn't like that. So when it came to observing people, Confucius had many different methods. Indeed, we are all just people as well. For example, someone wants to rely on a spiritual teacher. They need to see what's that teacher like. Even in Buddhism, when observing a teacher, in the 50 verses on guru devotion, for instance, some disciples are also supposed to observe their teacher too. Teachers are supposed to observe their disciples. There are 12 or 6 years of mutual observation. If you haven't observed carefully, a master-apprentice relationship has been established. Then falling into a deep abyss is very frightening. So when it truly comes to dealing with people, it's not nearly enough to simply possess knowledge. It's not nearly enough to just be exceptionally good with your words. Perhaps the most important thing is their inner morality. This is very important. But some morality is actually innate. Some people are indeed born with a very relatively kind nature. Some acquire it later in life, gaining it through education. No matter what, whether a person is trustworthy or not, this has always been the case since ancient times. This is also true among monastics. It's the same among Buddhists as well, especially when Buddhists don't observe carefully and rely on others with a particularly impulsive mindset. In the end, they end up failing and suffering losses themselves. Thus, the observational method Confucius taught, observe what he does, inquire into why he does it, and examine where he finds his ease, is something you should be able to recite from memory. Keep those 3 phrases on the tongue and in the mind. They are straightforward, clear, and easy to remember for daily practice. If you can really apply this in your daily life in the future, if you can do this, when we size up people and situations, we ought to judge with care and accuracy. Otherwise, hearing only a one-sided story and taking it on trust, we end up believing the wrong thing, and eventually we ourselves deeply regret it. No need for that. In this regard, what we talked about was seeing the subtle signs and knowing the beginnings. The saying, seeing the subtle signs and knowing the beginnings. For many things in the future, by carefully noticing even the smallest traits in a person, you can readily recognize the budding signs of what might potentially happen later on. This is something that we should be acutely aware of. So in our daily lives, I think that within Buddhist communities, many people are especially pure and very trusting. Some Buddhists, just because of a bit of superficial publicity or something on the surface, they might be easily swayed or influenced by what they perceive, will readily believe everything that others say. In the profound and intricate reasoning of Buddhist logic, if you truly rely upon a certain kind of reasoning to develop a correct and unwavering faith, then that is indeed the faith of the truly wise. But if a fool just follows what others say without thinking, that is the faith of the foolish.
This mindset, whether it's towards the Dharma or towards people, requires careful observation, which is important. That's precisely why Confucius was especially observant. He didn't readily believe things easily. But his way of observing things wasn't like our Buddhist logic's three-point reasoning. Confucius probably wouldn't really do that either. Didn't I say the other day that some people claim Shakyamuni Buddha, and I, the two of us, I must be really impressive. I know computers and all sorts of things, some old men also. Maybe they would talk as if they've completely gone mad, so Confucius would not necessarily be like you in your modern debate competitions, you see, using this kind of hand-clapping and foot-stomping style. This approach is not necessarily what he would use, but in reality, his way of observing things had another, deeper level of observation. Actually, this kind of observation between people is very good. Then the second important aspect, Confucius famously said, by reviewing the old and thoroughly learning the new, you can truly become a teacher. This is, in Confucius's profound thought, the very essence of the ideas of the ancient times and the contemporary modern era. The two need to be combined. He had many ways of interpreting things. Of course, interpreting things, sometimes when I see some teachers nowadays have their ways of interpreting, which are a bit different. But you might think that's not acceptable. So simply interpret it in your own personal way. As for this reviewing the old here, you truly need to approach it with genuine warmth and be able to fully understand the ancient and traditional old ways of thinking and their profound implications, while also making some exciting new discoveries and supplementing with valuable new knowledge. You need both the thinking of the ancients and to keep up with the times with modern knowledge. Combining these two concepts together, if you truly understand this crucial point, then you can indeed be a qualified teacher. What this indeed means is some of us completely discard the thoughts of the ancients or old cultures, leaving them all behind, which is also unreasonable. Some people stubbornly cling to ancient, outdated ideas and simply cannot accept any modern knowledge at all, just like Gendun Chompel wisely said, treating everything as if it was some kind of inexplicable magic. Actually, that's also unreasonable. These two, ancient and modern, are like two essential wings, providing balance and direction in the vastness of what we know. With these two powerful and expansive wings, you can truly soar freely and effortlessly. Therefore, understanding their significance is incredibly important. This is not just for us. For example, take Newton in the past, his law of universal gravitation. Why was it only when an apple fell to the ground? Only then did he realize that the entire special phenomenon of the moon orbiting around the Earth actually reflects his ancient philosophical thinking, just like when an apple falls to the ground. He discovered a new kind of gravity. His way of thinking actually combines both ancient and modern perspectives. After combining them, he reflected deeply on his own and unique insights. And only after careful thinking did he make the discovery. In fact, in our current academic institutions, the process of hearing, contemplating, and practicing is the same. For example, when we now discuss the Udana Sutra, the Buddha's thoughts from over 2,500 years ago, we ponder and reflect on them through the text, and after reflecting, we then apply them to our present-day lives. When we reach the 21st century, how do these two ways of thinking collide? And precisely how do they truly connect with each other? At such significant times, we often discover and come to realize that new and innovative sparks can be generated and created. That's why the ancients used to say, read a book 100 times and its meaning will naturally reveal itself. If we read a lot, if we read many of these books, then many profound and intricate meanings will naturally become clearly apparent. If we choose not to undertake this crucial process and instead only rely on our own completely new and untested discoveries, erroneously thinking that this established concept is fundamentally wrong and that other well-accepted ideas are also inherently flawed, and try to overturn all the old knowledge and reasoning, if you want to overturn all of it, I'm afraid you do not possess that particular ability, and if we ignore these significant new developments and emerging things as well, and always steadfastly stand on the old, outdated ways of thinking, since the world is constantly changing, if everything in the world is changing, and we stubbornly continue to cling to our original ground, I'm afraid that's just not going to work out either, unfortunately. So for us, nowadays many people are studying here, including Buddhists. I've always believed this. When it truly comes to deeply Buddhist thought or any practice, we absolutely cannot abandon them. We must always practice them diligently. But at the same time, As Buddhists, we should, on the one hand, we must learn some of the new and essential knowledge of today. If we truly do not learn this crucial new knowledge, then in the end, we genuinely won't have a firm foothold. Eventually, we won't have a secure place in the competitive market. We won't have our own world. The entire world will have already changed completely and profoundly. This includes us Buddhists as well, and indeed all of humanity. How do we make use of AI? Now there's ChatGPT 5, which was supposed to be released just the day before yesterday. It said that in the future, many things in the world, including jobs like doctors and teachers, their work will all be completely replaced. In that particular case, many of them might unfortunately lose their current jobs and become permanently unemployed. We Buddhists are no different. Whether it's translation or giving Dharma talks, many things also need to be viewed in light of this world. Of course, if you are in a cave and don't use anything, just sitting there like that, then that's not really an issue either. But as a practitioner, if you spend your whole life like this, transcending birth and death, that is a truly wonderful thing. Perhaps you don't need any of these things for that, but if you truly and genuinely want to spread the profound Dharma and benefit all sentient beings, or simply live a meaningful life in this world and truly walk together with other people, then we also need to deeply understand the old established ways of thinking and their historical context, as well as classical texts and traditional culture. And even worldly theories, we need to be familiar with these as well. But we also don't have the ability or the necessity to completely break away from them. Their lingering influence, their comforting habits always remain with us. Even now, we can vividly apply them in our lives. Sometimes when we actually see that, the other day, whether it was Khenpo Nobu or someone else, we said it was more than 2,500 years ago. Every story of Shakyamuni Buddha seems as if, even now, nowadays, there really is a poet who goes to the riverside. Because in our Udana Sutra, there are many sections, the water chapter, the horse chapter, and what exactly comes after that. There are so many word by word, the path chapters and so on, like these. Actually, the Buddha would meticulously describe everything in great and extensive detail, entirely using flowers as metaphors, entirely using water as metaphors, entirely using clouds as metaphors, entirely using the ocean as a metaphor. Now, poets today may not necessarily be able to do this, but in the second section of the Book of Songs, it does appear in the second section of the Book of Songs. It's all written using a single theme. There are such examples. So I think, well, all of us have at least somewhat open minds and are open to new perspectives. In Buddhism, many people in Tibet recite Om Mani Padme Hum every day, often with their eyes closed, reciting Om Mani Padme Hum, holding a prayer wheel and meditating behind closed doors. In this respect, they are dedicated practitioners, which is good. In Chinese Buddhism, aside from chanting Namo Amitabha, there are also other practices. If we completely ignore everything else entirely, I'm afraid that sometimes it can be a bit too narrow-minded. Of course, if your intellect or other aspects can't accommodate more, that's not something to be forced either. But in fact, for some young people in this vast and intricate world, all things that are truly valuable and deeply meaningful, shouldn't we try to understand them? Is there a need for this? So if you want to be a teacher, you need to review the old to learn the new. This teaching is very well known. I've also used it many times before. But in different situations, my methods of explanation might be different. Because nowadays, on the internet, if the earlier explanation and the later explanation are not the same, and these two distinct screenshots are carefully put together, then, well, I genuinely don't mind at all. Sometimes in different situations, the understanding of this reasoning can also subtly differ, depending on various factors. At different times, it's also inspired by different feelings. Now, let me talk about another point. Next is a 4-character phrase. This one is also quite interesting. Confucius said, "A gentleman is not a vessel." At first glance, it doesn't seem like much, but actually the content here is quite intriguing. It means that if one is a gentleman, we're not talking about Mifam Rinpoche's The Treatise on the Conduct of a Gentleman. Now, what we usually use is danba, the Tibetan term. A gentleman in this context refers to danba, or you could also say a wise person. But according to the ancients, someone who possesses both wisdom and learning and virtue, this person is called a gentleman. The term gentleman is quite broad. So when it comes to a gentleman, the idea is that he shouldn't be like a mere vessel. At first glance, what does this mean? But everyone knows what exactly is a vessel. For example, a bowl serves the function of a bowl, a teacup serves the function of a teacup, pillar functions as pillar, airplane functions as airplane, a train serves the function of a train, a computer serves function of computer. But when it comes to these vessels, in reality, their function is singular. They can only really do that one specific thing. A simple bowl can only ever be a bowl, but it certainly cannot be an airplane. That's just how it is. But a gentleman, a person, shouldn't be like a vessel, only able to do one thing and nothing else. So for all of us here, if you only study the 5 great treatises and know nothing else, that's not good either. If you only study Chinese and don't understand any Tibetan or anything else, that's not okay either. If you only truly know, for example, if I am just an expert in the Abhidharma Kosha and know nothing else besides that, that is simply not acceptable. Einstein once famously said that so-called experts are like well-trained dogs. What exactly is a truly well-trained dog? It's certainly one that's especially skilled, much like a canine companion that's particularly proficient and adept in a specific area. Because experts, actually Einstein himself was a physicist, he was also an astronomer, he himself was also an expert. So why did he criticize these experts? Actually, these experts only understand one thing and know nothing about anything else. For example, if someone is a dentist, they spend their whole life just looking at teeth, and that's all they know. An ophthalmologist only knows about eyes, and apart from the eyes, even the nose, which is closest to the eyes, they don't know anything about the nose either, let alone the whole head. This is how the fields of many experts are nowadays. So in Buddhism, actually, even the 5 great treatises cover a very limited scope. Take, for example, the omniscient Mipham Rinpoche. He was knowledgeable about astronomy and geography and also understood human affairs and divination. He was truly proficient in everything without any obstacles. He had a comprehensive grasp of all-encompassing knowledge. It's really quite remarkable. But to be like the omniscient Mipham Rinpoche is not something we can easily claim. We may not necessarily understand everything. But at the very least, when we study, we should try to learn a bit more. If we study more, there really shouldn't be any problem. I don't know everything either, but sometimes we certainly have very certain interests. For example, whether it's architecture or in the field of design or in the realm of literature or linguistics, sociology, management, the more knowledge you acquire and possess, the better. Of course, as practitioners, you might understandably feel that this could potentially make your mind scattered, but in reality, you should still endeavor to learn more, including some of you here, who, apart from being actual practitioners, I still advise everyone not to be like a vessel. If you're like a vessel, you only understand this one thing. Take a bowl example. A bowl is only used for eating, but a bowl can't be used as a stool or else. So if a person understands the Abhidharma Kosha and knows nothing else, as an expert in the Abhidharma Kosha, if you can't find a job, then you don't know anything. If you say, I understand the 5 treatises, but apart from the 5 treatises, if you don't know anything else, that's not good either. Yesterday I asked the 7 nuns, the ones who were studying English that day, and now I asked, are you the ones studying? They said at 6:20 in the morning. They gathered together to study, and I was very happy. Because if we only study just one subject, then know nothing else. That's not good either. For example, if you study English, English is, let's say when we look at something, any foreign product, even the instruction manual on it, although now you can use AI to take a picture and have it translated, at the very least you should understand a bit yourself. And when we study Chinese, actually, there is a vast amount of knowledge in Chinese. A lot of things in the world are like this. It's a really major language family. So if we have some particular interests, then we shouldn't just be like a vessel. We should strive to master anything we can. Actually, deep within our minds, there is actually something called the alaya consciousness. Alaya is also known as the storehouse consciousness. It contains a truly vast amount of stored knowledge, also referred to as the store consciousness. There are many inherent things within it. It just depends on whether you are truly willing to develop them. If you can develop them, then you can master English, Japanese, or any other language. Nowadays, there are many people abroad who are fluent in more than a dozen languages. There are even such people among Tibetans. And when it comes to any kind of knowledge, it is still very much necessary for us. So let's take a much closer look here. It quite clearly states that a true gentleman must be truly and completely versatile and cannot just know a little bit. Moreover, as people we may truly need to, as has always been said before, not only have intelligence, but also emotional intelligence and adversity quotient. People with high adversity quotient intelligence and emotional intelligence will be able to adapt and get along wherever they go in the future. When things are difficult, they change. When they change, they become accessible. When accessible, they last. Isn't this what the I Ching talks about? If we only know a little, sometimes we reach a dead end and have nothing at all. But if at that moment we are good at adapting, we will find a way through. If we can find a way through, then anything is possible. For example, the learning methods we used here last year, many of them involved encountering obstacles. When we face obstacles, we may already be at a dead end, exhausted, when at our limit we need to know how to adapt, right? I studied Madhyamaka, now I've changed and transformed. What was I like before? I'm about to change. If I change, my vitality and survival time will be significantly longer. Otherwise, in our lives, it's impossible for everything to truly remain unchanged. That's just not possible. Everything is constantly changing. So whether it's how we conduct ourselves or do things, or even in our own personal lives nowadays, some people used to truly devote their entire lives to just one single thing, like I'm a dedicated physicist, and just focus solely on that. But in the end, that got replaced by AI, and now we can't find a job at all. I see that we Buddhists also have this kind of situation. Some people spend their whole lives focused solely on the 5 great treatises. I've seen a few great masters like this. They started when they were very young teenagers. And even when their hair turned white, they were still debating, always immersed in the 5 great treatises. Apart from that, their whole world is just the 5 great treatises. But in the end, there are no more places left to teach the 5 great treatises. If that's the case, then every day is just the same. At first, they were still focused and dedicated like this, but they never got into the habit of reciting sutras or doing anything else. In the end, they just sit in tea houses every day. I've seen some people who are extremely proficient in the 5 great treatises, some truly remarkable individuals, but later on, if they can't find any sentient beings to teach the 5 great treatises to, then they're left with only themselves. And apart from this, they have no other skills. So, when we deeply study, I especially and truly trust and believe in this profound and timeless saying from the revered Confucius, "A gentleman is not a tool." It looks like just 4 characters. But for us practitioners, even to this very day actually, still indeed, it's true that none of us should become like a vessel or an instrument. You know exactly what vessels and instruments are, don't you? All of us, of course, if a person only debates. Nowadays, many people, especially when I go to some big cities, many of them have been laid off. In the past, in their own fields, they were quite impressive. But later, for various reasons, they were expelled from school or fired from their jobs, or for various other reasons, they left. After leaving, they couldn't even find a job. It's actually the same for monastics. If I only know how to recite scriptures and nothing else, without any special skills, there's no market for that. Or if I only know how to debate and have nothing else, that won't work either. So here it says, you absolutely have to know at least a little bit about almost everything. Just look at someone like Elon Musk. He's truly a remarkably impressive individual in so many different fields. He understands both aerospace and the internet. Back when the internet was just booming, he was already very skilled in the internet field. Then he moved on to aerospace, and now he is primarily focusing his efforts on new energy vehicles. When it comes to energy specifically, whatever he studies, he masters it all. And at this crucial point, he truly seizes the most important and fundamental core aspects of the entire world and delves into research. Actually, for us humans, we may not necessarily be able to match these big names, these truly remarkable great thinkers and brilliant scientists, but at the very least, we should cultivate a genuine and profound interest in every diverse and fascinating field of study. If we try to learn a bit of everything, at the least, it will benefit our own future. And in the future, it will be of great help if we truly want to benefit others. We absolutely shouldn't let our thinking become rigid. This is what's commonly called instrumental knowledge, where you become like a tool yourself and know nothing beyond that. This particular kind of knowledge is simply not entirely right or accurate. There's also something called search-based learning, where every day you just look at this bit of knowledge and that bit of knowledge, but your mind is never truly focused. This doesn't work either. Now, some experts say, I read so many books in a single day, so many books, but in reality, they're just promoting themselves to others. There are actually very few things they truly have a thorough understanding of. Many such phenomena exist in society. To understand them, we'll basically realize that all human world phenomena are like this. I should also know what I ought to do. This is still very much necessary. So regarding this particular statement, I think that on that specific day, they explicitly said that some individuals truly need to recite the Udana Sutra. Reciting this is actually quite a lot. But if you really can't recite anything else, when you see someone, remember, a gentleman is not a vessel. This means people shouldn't be like containers, only knowing one thing. Actually, whether in Tibet or Han regions, it's the same everywhere. There are many people in the world who are very much like empty containers waiting to be filled. I only know this and nothing else. Actually, this is not good at all. For example, some of the knowledge that His Holiness has truly, whether it is managing people, managing affairs, or even divination, he understands many things. Esoteric Buddhism, how to conduct oneself, how to handle matters. He knows it all. We may not be able to be exactly like him, like a Tisetsa figurine coming out of a mold, and achieve that level. But at the very least, we should have a significant interest in and thoroughly study these important areas, especially since many of you are still quite young and have much to learn. Your memory should be very good as well. When we reach this age, we can't remember things anymore. For example, even if we read a case study, in the end, we still can't remember it. Or a doctrinal proof as we get older, we can't remember. Perhaps when one's life reaches its twilight, not everything necessarily be useful. But at the very least, it's very important for everyone to have an interest in these areas. All right, let's stop here.
Bandara